Hello and welcome to the Sensual Being podcast with myself, your host, Jolene Whiting. I have been a pole dance teacher for nearly 20 years. I'm also a yoga instructor, and my favourite pastimes are connecting to my own sensuality, connecting with the world, and connecting with animals as well. In this podcast, you'll find new and inventive ways of how you see yourself, connecting yourself with others, and also how you see and view the world around you. Today, we are diving into the magic of tree wisdom, the ancient beauty of these trees that surround us. Enjoy. Hearing the raindrop onto the leaves, feeling them dance in the breeze. Have you ever listened to the trees? Their roots that run deep underground, the trunks that are mighty and round. Have you ever stopped to hear their sound? As we sit here and make our life make sense, the trees grant us with their mighty presence, making us realize our own true essence. Welcome, sensual being. This episode is one that fills me with a lot of joy. And you know I like to say to you, follow your highest joy, follow what lights you up, be you, and things like that. Well, this is one of those things that I just love, and that's trees. And if you are somebody who shares my wisdom and wonderings about trees, then this episode is going to be so connective for you. So with trees, I find it really interesting in the sense of it is something that's come more to the front of my field, particularly since turning off my TV. And I said, I got this feeling to go outside and all of this. By the way, you don't need to turn your TV off to do this. So this is just my journey with it. But I had this feeling of really going outside, and I didn't really understand why. And it really led me to a lot of grounding. And during that time of grounding and going to certain places, I started to connect more and more with trees. And I remembered a few things in my life that have also been trying to guide me this way. And yet when I look back, I wasn't listening in that same way. So going right back to being young, I grew up in the 80s, and I'm in the UK, and we have Clark's shoes. And they used to do, if anyone grew up in the 80s in the UK, you must remember Magic Steps from Clark's. These shoes, they were my school shoes. I thought they were the best, the absolute best. And when you got a pair of Magic Steps from Clark's, these shoes in the box would come. I'm pretty sure the box was all like pretty decorated as well. But they would come with this brooch, and this brooch was in the shape of a key. I can even remember it. I so wish I still had one. Maybe that's led to my fascination with keys as well. I'm not quite sure. Now I think about it, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I like keys. This must have come from there. But with this key, I used to run down to the bottom of my garden, and we had sort of quite a long, thin garden. Well, that's how I remember it. Maybe it was actually quite short and I was just shorter then. I must have been about, I want to say 7 or 8. And we used to have this tree at the bottom of the garden. And actually at the moment, I'm still trying to identify what tree that was. And I have not managed to do it. It's kind of like a blue pine kind of greyish tree. But anyway, it used to be at the end of the garden. And I used to run down to the garden at dusk. It was always at dusk. And I used to run down there in my Magic Steps, holding this key brooch, touch the tree, and then run back up. I don't know why. But it's one of my earliest memories of like being really connected with trees. And there was also, we had a rust tree in the garden. Actually, we had two, but I really took to one. And I've got so many photos of myself and my cuddly monkey within this tree. So I can remember playing with trees and being around them when I was little. So I can remember back that far with those sort of memories. And something else, this is where, when I tell you like the universe is guiding us, Mother Nature is guiding us and things like that. I've been guided to trees. So 3 of the places that I have lived the longest in a house have been all names of trees. And it only clicked like a couple of years ago. And I thought, oh, this is weird. And when I looked it up, one of the roads was called Mays, Mays, and you get a May tree. And I'm like, okay, I didn't even realize that was a tree. And then Willowbrook, I grew up, and obviously Willow Tree. There wasn't a willow tree down there, unfortunately. And Beech, Beechch. So obviously that's one of the UK's most like common trees is a beech tree. And it only clicked, and it's almost like at these points in my life, I was still being guided, like, you're going to like trees, come out and see us. And I just didn't recognize it until now. And I just find that sort of thing fascinating. When you look back, I find that sort of thing fascinating, where you think your life was always taking you in a certain direction, and yet you didn't realize at all. This is the thing of like being on your path, and actually you can't ever be off your path. You are still on your path. It's just, do you recognize that you are? I think that's a lot of what it is. But why trees? I just feel there's something, even on young trees, but particularly older trees, there's something quite ancient about them. They're almost, some of them with the bark, and particularly if they have a lot of indentation within the bark, they're so tactile, but it is like you are almost touching fossils. They have literally just been there, some of them for hundreds of years, some of them way more than that. But you kind of wonder, like, what have you seen? What have you experienced? Who have you known? How many other people, like I've formed a few relationships with a few trees that are local to me. I have like a few favorites that I don't know why, but I love them. And I'm like, gosh, how many other people do this now? How many other people did this like decades ago or centuries ago? I'm not the first. I'm not the only one. I know I'm not. And I find this all fascinating. And particularly when you get trees that are like I went to the trees of Old Sarum over Christmas time, and it's like this sort of boundary to like a medieval kind of grounds. But these big beech trees are like, they were boundary beech trees just because of where they are, and they've been allowed obviously just to grow, but at one point they probably were actually like a boundary. And it's fascinating to think, gosh, what have they seen? What have they experienced? And I find this type of wisdom to be held, like, because I really believe that there's so much energy to be found in every individual thing, and particularly every individual living thing. So trees are living, and to think of what they have experienced. And I just find that their presence is so captivating. And they kind of, when I say like Mother Nature's holding us and guiding us, that's how I feel about trees. I feel like they are holding me and guiding me. And I think we've been taught to like dumb it down, because I grew up remembering this phrase being said, tree hugging hippie, and it was stupid, and I just feel like it's another one of those things I've been brought up with, being taught is stupid, just through social norms and things like that. The 60s movement, or whenever it was that the, hippies and, all spiritual, and it was all woo woo, and it was all stupid. And And I'm like, no, 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 no. That was not, I don't think that was true. I think they were onto something, but it was so like dumbed down and idiotic that I wouldn't want to do that, which is what society wants me not to do. So again, like there's so many things I get drawn to because I'm like, oh, well, why is that stupid? I don't now understand. And I'm questioning so much more now, so much more. And when I talk about trees being alive, I have a real big pondering about this, about their soul. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but obviously you'll probably agree with me. Yeah, trees, they have a soul. Great, we're on the same path. But if a tree gets struck down by lightning or they fell it or, they say, a bit like ash dieback, the tree's diseased and it died. When is it dead? When does the soul leave the tree? Somebody said to me recently, maybe the soul is kind of like universal and kind of in everything. Like it's all so connected in. It's a bit like the tree roots are connected in with the mycelium roots that, the signals that travel underneath that tell mushrooms where to pop up to help each other and stuff. There's such a big like convoy system that communicates through the tree roots and the mycelium links. So you could argue like maybe the soul never leaves. But in my little head, I kind of think, oh, well, if a tree falls over, but you could still take a cutting from it. And it's a bit like a yew tree. If a branch falls off, that branch can actually form roots in the ground and create another yew tree. So you can see my dilemma. So this is a little insight into my mind of where my mind goes. I'm like, yeah, but what happens about the soul? How long is it in there for? When does it go? Does it move? Maybe the person who told me that it's like one big soul, they could be onto something. But it's, I remember when my dad passed. I remember when my dog passed. I remember watching their soul leave their body. And I'm like, so when does that happen to trees? Enjoy that thought. Enjoy that keeping you awake at night. But I find trees are very much a mirror for our lives, and they are a reminder of how I truly believe we should try our hardest to live our lives. So when it comes to winter, like now, a time of like deep rest, the leaves on the trees, most trees have all shed, unless they're evergreen. But, on a lot of trees, native trees particularly, they've all shed their leaves, or most of them. And they're at a time of rest and rebuilding themselves, ready for the blossom to come out in the springtime. And they all do that blossom at different times, again, like us. We all bloom at different times. And then as we go into summer, and, the leaves becoming more vibrant and maybe like fruits and nuts coming onto the tree and then ripening towards like harvest time and Lammas time towards August, they all go through this different cycle. But it's all kind of the same cycle at the same time, because then they descend into autumn as they then go into winter and they sort of start shedding their leaves and letting go. And you could argue, why are we not doing this? Why are our businesses not more flourishing in the summer and then allowed to retract a little bit in the winter? To actually nurture ourselves and give ourselves what we need, to let go of what we don't need anymore. And this is so hard to do. Like when I, even in meditations, when I say take a deep breath in and breathe out and let go, you don't just let go. It takes a lot, and sometimes it's easy to let go and drop the shoulders and feel relaxed, and then other times you're like, yeah, ain't no way I'm letting go today. No. And it's a process, but it's also that allowing of space to do that. And this is why I like the trees, because they remind us that it's okay. It's okay to let go. I mean, at the times like now when there's like snow on those naked branches and they look almost like these like snow caterpillars on the branches. And there's beauty in that. There's beauty in the starkness of the trees. And then as you know, they start to bloom and you see the blossom. And sometimes if you've not really smelt blossom before, my favorite is apple blossom. Oh my God, it is just the aroma. Just stick your nose in there. Mine there's not a bee in there, but have a good sniff because it is just so, so good. It's like the best perfume. It honestly is the best. I've not used it as perfume, but I want to so much. And it's like really taking note of their seasons and seeing if we can actually go with them, to go with nature rather than to fight it. And I'm not saying that if you feel full of beans in January that you shouldn't act on it. Like, yeah, you do you. Because I have that too. I sometimes feel like, oh, I'm feeling really, vibrant. And it's like the depth of winter. It's like, that's okay. But what I'm saying is on a majority, if we can listen to the season, listen to our body and remember that we are also nature. And the more we can hone in to our true self, I feel like we get so much more. It's like if I need a day or two of rest, when I have that and I come back, I am so much more on it. And I feel so good. So, so good. But it's only because I've given myself that time of rest. If I was like, oh no, I've still got to go. I've still got to keep going. I've still got to do this. I'd probably end up just making myself ill. Now, there will be people with different lives who will say, oh, well, I just can't do that. I have to work this job, and this job just to make ends meet. And I get that, okay? But if we can start to take bits of this, little bits of it, and integrating it into our lives, even if it's just allowing yourself space of 5 minutes a day to take deep breaths for 5 minutes. You'd be surprised. It's only 5 minutes a day. You can even do this with your children. And it's okay if they don't want to do it. But you can always try. Because I know children can hold people back. I know they can in this sort of way. But try and include them. Like, this isn't just for you. It's for them as well. They're also nature. And they're probably more connected to nature than we are. So bear that in mind. Like, this does not have to be done on a big scale. A lot of the time it's the acknowledgement to be able to help us to find that rest, to find that time for ourselves. And I do also appreciate trees because they take the carbon out of the air and they give us fresh air to breathe. And that's why I just can't believe sometimes how the trees get cut down. I know sometimes, they do get cut down for purposes and things, but sometimes you think, why have you just cut all those down? We kind of need them to live. And I just find that really bizarre. But also, on the flip side, really conflicting in my head, whilst I absolutely love trees, as you've got that idea by now, I also really love my log burner. Like, there's something about it. And when I read this book recently, which was a book on life purpose, it's a little bit like numerology, but not quite exactly the same. So it used some numerology techniques to make this book. And this book, when you read it, it's like you're reading your life. It's really weird. But one of the things in it says, you'll benefit from a place with a fireplace. And I'm like, does it say it on every one? And it's just said it on mine. It's really odd. But there's something very connective I get, even from just cleaning the fireplace out in the morning to actually restocking the wood and burning the wood. And I find this really bizarre because I love trees. So sometimes I don't know what to do with the information in my head. So I figured I'll pass it on to you and we'll see what we could do with it together. But when we come into like treating ourselves like the season of the trees, when we look at, you've probably seen that thing that was done on the redwood trees. I can't remember where it was. I think it was somewhere in America. They injected these redwood trees, I think it was with adrenaline, so that they wouldn't go into their hibernation. And they all died. All these redwood trees died. because they were forced to go against their own nature. And this is what's happening to us. Maybe not directly, we are dying, but parts of us are not living because we can't live how we want to live. So we're having to make ourselves more busy at the wrong time of year to do that, to push, particularly January. I mean, come on. January, push. Come on, new goals, new targets, New Year's resolution. And actually, if you don't feel that, that's cool, because all the new shoots and everything in nature don't start coming up till spring. So why should we? But when you look at that study that was done on the redwoods, I mean, that's just heartbreaking. I mean, to be honest, who in their right mind thought it was a good idea? I don't know. Anyway, there's some weird people in the world. I don't really know what to do about them. But I also love the randomness that I find with trees. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, actually, it was just before Christmas, and I was thinking, I really want to find one or two yew trees. And I know there's loads of yew trees around, but I wanted to find one or two yew trees that I could go and kind of hang out with and be in a bit of a sacred space, and maybe slightly off the beaten track, not one that's right in a graveyard on a busy road, but to find just one or two. And I thought about that in the morning. And when I was taking my dog out, I was thinking about where to go, and I thought, I'm going to go down this particular path. I haven't been down there in a while, and I'd only ever been down there once. And this was before my study with trees started to take off, because I've only really started to learn how to identify them properly now. And it's a minefield. It's actually really hard to do. But there's some that you can identify really easy, like a willow tree or a silver birch. But then there's other ones that you're like, is it oak? Is it ash? Because particularly in winter, they look quite similar. So it is quite hard to identify them. So that's been a new passion of mine over the last 6 months. And I found, if you're interested, a fantastic tree walk in Glastonbury with a guy called Matt. And his handle, I think, is To the Trees. I will post a link to it in the show notes for this. And it's so wholesome. It's so informative. If you love trees, he'll take you around some of his favourite trees in Glastonbury, including a absolutely phenomenal linden tree called Grandmother Lime. And the first time I was in her presence, I could just feel these tears. And I sung to her before we left, and it was just so powerful. And I don't understand this magic power that trees have. I can't tell you. I don't understand it, but it's like a calling. I can't hear it, but I know it's there. It's like a feeling. But anyway, back to the yew trees, the randomness of these yew trees, right? So I thought, I'm going to go on this walk down this path. I've only been down there once before, a couple of years ago. And I thought, cool. And then as I was driving, I thought, do you know what? No, I'm not going to go there. It's a bit far. Not that far, but it's further than I thought about going. I thought, I'm just going to go down a regular path that I know. And then I ended up sort of going a long way round. And I still wanted to go to just a regular path, but then I got stuck behind some farm equipment. And then I was like, and I'm by the road, which would take me towards that path. And I thought, okay, I think the universe is blocking the road to tell me to go down there. So I went down there, got to the path, went for the walk, down this walk, bearing in mind that thought I had in the morning about the yew trees, went down there, came to a little crossroad, went straight over, to my left, 2 big yew trees. And I was like, are you kidding me? Not only that, it was just slightly off the beaten track. Both of these yew trees have clearly been spotted before, because they had a beautiful circle of these white stones that had just been collected from around the area, and these beautiful collection of white stones circling both trees. And it's a male and a female tree as well. And the energy in there, it's like you go into a yew tree cave. It is phenomenal. And I couldn't believe my luck. I thought, I remember these trees, but I didn't know they were yew trees. So I honestly felt like that day that I was guided there. And this is what happens. And the same thing happens when I go into bookshops. Sometimes I've gone into bookshops, particularly secondhand bookshops. So there's a lot of books in those shops. And I've been guided to go like straight in there, straight up to a certain point, and then pulled out the first book I see, and it's ended up being a life-changing book. And I'm like, how did this just happen? But the same thing happens to me with trees. The insights I get when I'm with them. And last year in the summer, I took some cacao and I went out into the trees, and I've got like I said, I've got relationships with a few different trees. So I've got like favorite spots in different areas. And I just sat underneath these 2 pine trees, and it's like a gorgeous little nook. And I was just there on my own, and the insights that came through just by me being there. And like I meditate often, and yet this was different. It's completely different. And I just find it so bizarre. And I kept on getting drawn to ash trees last year. And I was going drumming with my friend Dee, and we were going to go off like into the woods where we had been before. And then we decided, after we chatted for a bit, should we just go up the road into the onto the village green? And she was like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And she said, come over here to this tree. This one's really good. And we're walking over to it. And I said, what, that one? And she said, yeah. I said, that's an ash tree. And she said, is it? And I went, yeah. Why do I keep getting drawn to ash trees? And it's just the randomness of it. And when you start looking into like a lot of like tree lore and folklore around trees and the wisdom that's behind it, according to a lot of people's opinions, particularly Glennie Kindred, I think that's how you say her name. I've got loads of her books. I absolutely love them. Love them. I will post her name in the show notes as well. But Glennie Kindred, she's got this amazing connection with trees, and she's written so many books about it. And I've got a lot of now that I've got into trees a lot, I've sort of started to try to understand, like when I'm drawn to a tree, and like work out why is that. And then I'll go back to her books and think, that's exactly what I'm going through right now. And it's a bit like, for example, yew trees at the moment, they're calling me a hell of a lot. That's the main thing at the moment that's calling me, are yew trees. And when you understand about the yew trees, they are a death and rebirth tree, which is why you find churches around them. Now, you don't find them in church graveyards and churchyards. You find the churches around them, because the chances are with most of these yew trees that are situated right next to churches, the yew trees actually date back further than the church does. So when we think about the church, the churches are a lot about death and rebirth. And these trees signify that on a big scale. So the fact that I'm being called to those a lot at the moment, I just find fascinating, because there's a lot of my life that is changing. I mean, we're selling the house this year, we're moving this year. There is a lot that is changing in my life. So there's a lot of things that are falling away, and the death and rebirth doesn't necessarily mean an actual physical death or a birth of a child. Yeah, it can actually mean just the way your life is going through a pivotal moment of change. So death and rebirth is never a bad thing in that sort of sense. It's just quite pushy and challenging, maybe. Pushy and challenging, which is good, because if we don't have that in our lives, then nothing will ever change. And this is why I love the magic of tree wisdom, because it honestly taps you in to your psyche to see what's going on, how you're doing, and asking the trees questions. If you listen, you will get the answers. And I'm not necessarily saying that the tree will form a face and talk to you, but on some level they do. There's like a exchange that comes through to you, and the grounding that you get through trees is so beautiful. So when you ask a tree a question, try reaching out to it and placing your hand on it. Try saying hello to the trees as you walk by. And I like to also, as I'm in the car and driving by, particularly if I'm passenger, I see all these trees on like lining like the motorways and the A roads and things. And I look at them and I think, my God, has anyone ever stopped to appreciate these trees that are right here? And these trees that are right here, they are giving us such, much cleaner air to breathe. And that is just absolutely magical. It's like they can't live without us and we can't live without them. And that sort of relationship, I just think, is beautiful. You know, we're so tied into nature. We're so connected to nature. We breathe in oxygen, which they give us, and we breathe out carbon, which they need. That cycle of life is just magical. So I hope you've enjoyed my insight with trees. Feel free to message me and let me know which are your favourite trees or any tree stories that you've had as well. Remember, as always, to lead through your life with your heart and to live with intention. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends and on social media. If you have the time to rate or review this podcast, I'd be ever so grateful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Jolene Sensual Being. The links to my YouTube and to sign up to my mailing list will be in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.